Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Deep Learning with PolyAI. I'm Michelle. I lead marketing here, and I'm joined by Nicola.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Awesome. So we hope you've been enjoying the holiday break. And if you haven't had time to be like just perusing the news headlines surrounding AI, we've done it for you. I think the biggest one of this week is the New York Times suing OpenAI. And it's a potentially monumental setting case around the whole notion of copyright, fair use. What's the value of journalism in a day like today? Um, yeah, where do we go from here? Like, why is this historic? So I guess we'll start there. Like, really, what are they suing for? Um, yeah, and what is that? What does it mean? I guess for the AI world and for anybody who's using
Yeah,
open data
yeah,
to
yeah.
train a
I mean,
model.
I think that in the whole thing, to not quote it verbatim, but I think they are claiming billions of uh, damages from like OpenAI using their data to train and deliver a service. Is valuable and they're making money off of it. I think Altman said that OpenAI revenue is 1.3 billion as of last October, right? So I'm kind of finding it hard to see how it's billions of damages so far, but hey, I think few people would think that New York Times does not have an inflated sense of self-worth. Um, so um, it's a bit like GDPR run amok, right? Where, for example, with a machine learning model, anyone whose data you've ever used can go back and say, "Hey, remove my data." Then, if you
Yeah.
did, you'd have to go and retrain the whole thing. So, one thing they're asking for is for the models trained with their data to be destroyed and recreated. So, like they're probably asking for, at the very least, you know, a rerunning of a training sequence that probably cost a few million, if not more, right? And to me, it sounds a bit like NIMBYism, right? Because look, okay, if they ask for it, then is the Guardian going to ask for it?
Yeah.
Is your local neighborhood newspaper going to ask for it as well?
Yeah.
And it might be fair to say, hey, don't use my data, right? But
Well, I think, in order to think about that whole thing, like, are all journalistic, publications gonna link arms and join a lawsuit like this or join the bandwagon? I mean, think about GDPR. How many people actually requested to have their data removed and why? And, like, what groups of people, uh, feel kind of infringed upon when companies are using their data, usually to market to them. I think the way to kind of get at the answer to that or to try to predict the future would be to say, like, really, what is the threat to these companies, to people who look like the New York Times? And so if you go to them and it's like, it's billions of dollars and, actual and statutory damages, what does that mean? Like, where are those damages coming from? I mean, I don't know. I saw the one of the things in the complaint was this article about a cab, about the New York City cab, like a business. It's a huge business versus Uber, I believe. And it was almost word for word, the training model, which was exposed by ChatGPT. We could ask it to say, like, hey, how did you get this information? Like, tell us a little bit about how you were trained on this. And it'll expose stuff that should have been behind a paywall. So is the threat their profit? Like, is the threat that they're concerned that the day when GPT catches up to, the time that we live in now and is not based on information from 2021, that they're going to be threatened, their intellectual property is going to be out there for the world to see, and will that have a monetary impact? I mean,
that's a
is it
really
bec
good. I
Yeah.
mean, like, I am 100% confident that you know way more about journalism than I do. So please tell me if I'm wrong. But the, there are really two value streams for the consumer for a publication like New York Times, right? One is reporting, real time reporting, right? Kind of like you are my trusted source of information. If you know, what the latest happening in Ukraine or Gaza is, like you will provide that information in a trustworthy way. Um, an LLM won't challenge that. The best they can do is not be retrained to provide that information because that would be monumentally expensive and also just impractical because that information has to come from somewhere
Yeah.
physical, real world, right? So yeah, it can. Then you basically move into a mode where you're using the LLM do API calls off of Twitter, off of anything else, and that'll bring the old and familiar misinformation and everything. Where you know the same question is: does a New York Times journalist sit on Twitter and YouTube and watch for geolocation reports from Ukraine to establish where the battle lines are? Or do they actually have people in the field who are
Sure.
speaking with commanders there and everyone and, providing that information in good real time form
Yeah.
to their
Yeah.
readers? I think they are doing that. And like, that's clearly not going to happen. So people who are subscribed to New York Times because they want this real time stream of information, I don't see how that's under threat, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of the processing. So like the thought of or the promise of journalism, right, is that you have these people with the best intentions, you know, performing a public service of taking information and putting it in a format that people understand and that helps them understand the world around them and understand, what's likely to happen next or why is this politician seeing things this way or saying these types of things or why are these problems happening? And they are uniquely, in fact, I think they used that word. They said they had uniquely valuable content. And the way that it's unique is by the process, is by the lens through which they're filtering truth, right? And an LLM has its own lens too, but just like something that you said before just made me think of this. There was a time when I was in college, you could get a discounted New York Times subscription. It's expensive, even
Yeah.
especially for poor college kids. But but yeah, you could get a discounted kind of subscription and when I think about that, just the fact that their public service, this sort of thing that they want to uphold the integrity of journalism, that they want to give you the truth in the most unfiltered form, but in a way that's tempered and easy to understand. It's maybe a similar kind of philosophy that would be behind wanting to train a model well, wanting to kind of train it with integrity, with information that's not, just regurgitated garbage from, like the blogs, the internet blogs, or like
Yeah, I
Twitter,
mean,
like
if we're
people with
gonna go
opinions,
with those
basically.
ideals, it's like, "Hey, guys, loosen up. Like,
Yeah.
chill. Let your data help the world," right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah,
especially on
exactly.
rural times, like, you'd expect that from the way that they see the world, right? I was gonna say, like, okay, so the first part is, like, the real-time piece, right? If you trust New York Times above other newspapers to get to be that source of information and you're willing to pay, well, nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
Um the second stream is like the opinion pieces, right?
Yeah.
Like you trust them to provide a unique, valuable perspective based on not necessarily, information from the last 6 hours, 12 hours. Maybe we get to the point where we're tuning LLMs so fast that they can be, knowledge up to yesterday, knowledge up to 6 hours ago. Look, we may get there very soon, right? At which point you're like, okay, what if this LLM writes something so thought provoking that makes you completely question your perspective on something? And then you go and you're like, wow, I don't need to read columns from New York Times or Guardian, but instead,
Yeah.
I have a stream. And the thing is, if an LLM can produce this thing, it's not only true that it can produce one, then it can produce 1,000, right? And like you could then, if you kind of like are, the CFO of New York Times, and you look at like your future revenue streams, I could see it, as like a meaningful split between the two services they provide, right? And then, yeah, this is under threat, but it would be pretty arrogant and self-absorbed of them to think that their content alone will create that and that they have any shot whatsoever of that future coming to be. I'm not saying it is, right? I think that there will be, we will increasingly have different autopilots and we will use different things to do our work, like
Yeah.
you and I, but also like, a writer at New York Times. And, maybe the best opinion pieces of 5 years from now will be heavily co-created with AI. Why not? Right?
Yeah.
I think New York Times should stop doing NIMBYism and kind of like looking at its own data as this, single thing, unless they're really preparing a revolution where every single newspaper jumps on a union train, gets their data. Like they'll slow down OpenAI, but at the end of the day, the discussion goes to there will be someone in Beijing or in Moscow who will go buy one subscription to the website crawl the whole data set, and then train that model.
Sure.
So the model will be there.
Sure.
And in the end, that model, one way or another, will find its way there. So I think if it's just a play at really finding a way to get penalties out of their data, they're probably doing the right thing, right? I mean, they're not non-business savvy people.
Yeah.
So really what it's about. And I think it's fair, right? Is it billions of damages? Well, American law works, right? You know, it's for hundreds of billions. In the end, we cut a deal somewhere and the whole thing goes away.
I wonder if the New York Times is fighting something else entirely. And it's a battle that I think journalism has been like they've been under siege from social media and this concept of bespoke realities, which this great sociologist, I can't remember her name, came up with. I actually read about it on the New York Times, ironically. But this idea
What's your
of that.
discount subscription?
Yes, of course. But of course. But yeah, so this idea that you're being served the reality in media that you want to see. So, the algorithm serves you stuff that you're interested in. Truth gets distorted, or into that wormhole you go down. Um, and so the New York Times is fighting yet the same way the Washington Post might have been before they were, acquired
Mhm.
by Amazon, but they're fighting to sort of maintain their own reality and be able to write from their own perspective, take truth, turn it into opinion, and serve that out as its own intellectual property without it getting distorted and diluted and transformed by someone else's prompt. I think that that's really, if I had to guess, what the battle is actually about. But the really interesting thing there is this idea that is it really copyright infringement to train a model, to train a student, to train a person? Like you think about Prince, like one of the greatest like artists ever, right? He didn't become Prince by just learning to play piano kind of in a silo and like playing guitar. He like studied Sly Stone. He obsessed over James Brown videos to figure out how to dance, how to move, how to sing, how to put all the pieces together. He obsessed over other artists and did hours and hours and hours of copying, not study, copying. And then because he's his own unique artist with his own perspective, out came what we know of as Prince, or what we know of the artist formerly known as Prince. But like that's not copyright infringement. The output, the product that we see and we all celebrate, like is not you can't tie it back. Like, James Brown can't sue him
Yeah.
posthumously. It's just like that's just kind of crazy. So I think that at the core of this lawsuit is the scariest thing for anyone who's an AI creator, anyone who's you know a creator at all. I don't know.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, like the whole thing about like protecting their right to be that and to not have it distorted. Well, like the one problem you have with LLMs is that like the whole like, accountability and saying, I'm telling you this because I read it in the New York Times. It might hallucinate if you ask it where it's from, but like probably not. And like,
Yeah.
I think the mode of using these models is going to become such that you question it all and you go to the source to look for it. And I think there will be a lot of good tooling and methods that will come out for this, like in the very near future. So I don't think that the threat to them of like, hey, New York Times said this and, it's fake news. Like, I don't think that's really like going to happen or that there's a high risk of that being a thing. But yeah, I mean, I think like, well, I mean, they are a major, powerful publication, but they're not that big. So I think like the evolution of AI, like honestly, they're kind of inconsequential.
Yeah.
And okay, like
Maybe.
the easiest thing that I would do if I were at OpenAI dealing with this would be like, hey, cool guys, right? Okay, here's some money,
No.
disappear from my life, and I will never use your data again because your data is 0.0000000.
Yeah.
This for 30 seconds, 1% of what I've been trained on, right? And I've been trained on far more quality opinion pieces, which are, classical novels and, works of great philosophers that are
Sure.
better
Sure.
than your stuff, honestly. Like your stuff
Oh man.
is, for the
Shots
most,
fired.
well, it is, but like, come on, get a grip, right? Like,
Yeah.
what you think about, what the Fed should do relative to this or culture wars or whatever is but some scribbles on a piece of paper in the grand scheme of
Yeah.
history, everything that humanity ever produced. So, like, get a grip.
But
You want
maybe
to influence this model at all? Fine, don't. Right?
maybe
Like,
that's
keep it at the
exactly the
least.
problem. Sorry, but maybe that's exactly the problem, is that they are mounting to scribbles on a piece of paper, that they are staring down their own fate by the LLM sort of like capture of what they do. It's like we talk about corporate capture in the form of regulation. Um, like maybe at the heart of this, the New York Times does want to slow down AI. They do want to slow down the progress. That to say that their percentage of content that they're contributing to the universe of sort of training content is significant, but maybe that is what they're trying to do. Maybe they are trying to sort of inspire others like them to slow down the pace of progress because it is absolutely, and maybe a threat, I think, to their.
Well, I don't think, I mean, that would be like, shots fired and you just emptied another round of bullets into them. But like, I don't think they think of it that way, right? But like the real threat of, hey, like, is this coming for us? Am I but some scribbling on a piece of paper? I mean, what are our lives at the end of the day? A small imprint on, the general flow of humanity history, right?
I
And
hope so.
like I mean, like what can they do, right? Like their piece there, how are they different from the Guardian or
Sure.
pick your favorite, like left wing or right wing publication in any country, right? They produce thoughts and, they're all filled with intelligent people with slightly different worldviews. Like the business model versus like the idealistic view of journalism, like the, yeah, like they're kind of like, they need to be separated here. And I think like what you're getting at is something really important, which is like, is what I do important? If I scream and do something now, can I like cling on to this thought that like
Yeah.
I do something meaningful, that it's really important, that like it's worth a lawsuit against something that is a historic development. And honestly, like just turn on Serbian skeptic mode. Could it maybe just be a cry for attention?
Yeah. Yeah. What does that attention buy them? I mean, I think that the
Or
audience that is.
they're just sitting there in a room and it's like, let's say you and I are like, you're the editor in chief and I'm like your deputy. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Someone should sue these guys, down
Yeah.
the sample drink. You know what? Why shouldn't we sue these guys? Like
Yeah.
you totally bet on the New York Times to be the ones that actually pulls the trigger on it.
I think, though, let's turn the cynicism all the way down. Like, let's say, like, what do they actually want? Do they want billions of dollars? No. I'm guessing no. Or maybe they do, but I'm guessing no.
Come for
What
royalty.
is Yeah, royalties, like, but really, like, what is the solution to this? Like, what is the version of, like AI meets content that exists out on in the world? What's the best kind of most harmonious version of that? Is it citations and attribution of like where this thing is learning things from? Is it not accessing things behind a paywall? Is it, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
look, you you lead marketing here. We all know how hard attribution is, right?
Ah,
This will come as an inbound, outbound, both, was it partner, source, influence,
sure.
etc. The real issue we have with LLMs and deep learning overall is that we can't really attribute. Like, did the model write this genius opinion
Yeah.
piece? That guy, New York Times, from year 2018 to year 2020, was the catalyst for it? Well, you know what? Maybe, right? And then like the thing wrote the pivotal piece that, prevented World War III.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but how are we gonna even attribute that? Like it's stuff, right? I think like collective action by like all media, etc. Well, I don't know. I mean,
I mean,
this is
like,
like
you look at a company like Wikipedia, right, which built their foundational sort of tenets on the fact that they were going to be able to cite the internet, that they were going to be able to be the source of truth, this neutral kind of, repository of information that cites everything. And if anybody, like, leading marketing, if anybody's ever tried to create a Wikipedia page for a company or a person and realize how difficult it is and how stringent, yes, there's workarounds, but like how stringent their rules are for, like content approval, maybe it is part of or behind a lot of the impetus for this lawsuit, which is like, can we get to a place where, where you have a Wikipedia esque, I don't know, attribution model.
yeah. I mean,
Would not work
it's
in our
a
business, not
lot
work
of
for marketing, but
it's so much data though, right?
yeah,
And like I, if you were to audit anyone who's built like a data lake for something like this, like I'm betting that it wouldn't be trivial to actually go through and kind of like fully identify exactly where everything came from, unless,
Yeah.
that person is far more disciplined than I ever did when I
Yeah.
did anything. Um, it's a lot of data. And then like just even attribution wise, it's like, you know, these words the model learns from, they look very similar to a lot of other words, right? Like, um, I don't know. I think like the path of least resistance for OpenAI here is just to suggest like you're up, like your data's up. It's cool. I can guarantee that. That's proper GDPR at the end of the day, right? Although not, I think, fully applicable here in that sense. But um, nothing will change for OpenAI.
Nothing will change for them except that they opened a very interesting door where anybody who's competitive now with them can pay people or, do things that are not right in order to get other people to join and pull their information. And there are big, big repositories of data. Wikipedia is one. Um, there are many, many other things. If they did all start to pull out, um, would make a meaningful difference.
Yeah, and I guess if you're trading on something that references the New York Times, did you indirectly still infringe on their content? I don't think it'll be that easy to enforce. Now, of course, you could maybe have a self-serve model for all the people going after you, where you reveal your data and you go, tell me what your data is. We'll review it, kind of like Wikipedia, and remove it if
Yeah.
so. And I think that works for Wikipedia because it's fully public. You and I can go and edit any article now. You can try, and it'll be reviewed, and we'll see what happens. Um, the one major thing here is rather than, there are training procedures and the know-how of how they train their GPT models and the data pre-processing and post-processing steps between the crawling that they do. But the data mode is really the thing they have that is the most important one. And they wouldn't be able to just share it with everyone like that
Yeah.
without losing that competitive differentiation. So it's not really in their interest to serve it in the Wikipedia would or did, right? Um, so I don't really know. Right? It's interesting.
It is interesting. It is
Maybe New
interesting.
York Times will write something interesting about why they're suing, and then we can use your subscription to read the thing and comment on the next one. I don't know.
Yeah. And then talk about it here and infringe on their copyright because we
Maybe
learned
we get
about
sued as
that.
well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's super interesting. There are probably a lot of,
Who do you think sues them next?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think
Because it would be really, and I've not had the time to properly sit down and look at Twitter around this, but I'd wager that the irony is not lost on if New York Times and similar left leaning ones all opt out. That we get a Breitbart fueled
sure.
55, and I'm not sure how that's in the public interest, to be honest.
I mean, I think right now it's in the public interest because hopefully they cancel each other out and get something neutral in the middle.
Yeah,
But
exactly. But
that's that's not. I don't know if that's what's happened either. It's almost like this bespoke reality thing where you ask what you get. The way that you prompt it,
yeah,
influences what you. Yeah, it's super interesting. I could see incredible impacts on the academic world as well for these types of questions that are being asked and brought up by this lawsuit. But yeah, I think we're going to need to see what happens. What does the judge say? Do they get a jury? Are they granted like a
how
real
fast do these
trial?
things get resolved? Typically,
Oh goodness, like we could be talking about this 2 years from now.
it's not that bad. But yeah,
Um, yeah, I
mm.
mean, we'll see. We'll definitely see.
Where did they sue them? New York,
I think so. Yeah,
just
Manhattan. Yeah,
and
federal.
then we'll get a Brussels one and a London one, and then mm.
Yep. Those will do better than the New York ones, I'm sure. Should have
I
filed
don't
it in
know.
California or Germany.
Yeah,
Based on the GDPR precedent, like what we know happened there. Anyway, it's
it's
super,
interesting. I
super
mean,
interesting.
hypothetical, right? They're definitely opening up in a Pandora's box of these things. Someone will just ignore it, right? That's the real kind of like downer here is they might slow them down, but they can't really stop the whole field.
No.
Best case, they make money on it, which I guess is a decent enough expected outcome for them. So.
And it just seems so that seems to me somehow, that seems like the most cynical take. It's like they're doing it for money.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who knows? Awesome.
How's your Christmas going?
It's been going great. It's been going great. Yeah. There's no drama. Lots and lots of I was speaking with the producer of this podcast earlier, and he was saying that there are shards of Christmas wrapping paper everywhere. That's kind of the state of fortunately my parents' house where we had Christmas and not here. What about
Oh, nice.
yours?
Not bad, not bad. My daughter just figured out how to stand up, so I think that's just
Oh, no.
the fascination. So yeah.
Well, what goes up, unfortunately, must
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
hopefully for Christmas she got like some padding, some
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
nice. Nice. Well,
Michelin.
you enjoy New Year's, and
You do.
we'll speak soon.
See you guys next year.